Lou Elizondo is on his way to interview a former U.S. Air Force officer willing to speak about his UFO sighting for the first time. The alleged sighting took place at an Air Force base with nuclear weapons and a long history of strange encounters.
My name is Daniel Gibson. I'm a retired Air Force major.
Major Gibson, thank you very much for taking your time to come and speak with us here today. I'd like to start by asking you, what inspired you to come here today and why now?
In the fall of 1995, I was stationed at Malmstrom Air Force Base in Montana, right outside of Great Falls. Malmstrom is primarily a ICBM missile base.
Since the 1960s, Malmstrom Air Force Base has housed hundreds of intercontinental ballistic missiles with nuclear warheads capable of destroying entire cities. During the Cold War, the base was a key part of America's nuclear arsenal that provided a protective arc across the nation's northern tier.
Launch trajectories from the Soviet Union come over the poles across Alaska and Canada. A ring of bases were established across the northern United States to house both ICBMs and strategic bombers. And they were the bedrock of our strategic deterrence and our security and safety.
Maintain alert under War Plan Bravo.
In the fall of 1995, Gibson was on board a KC-135 as it conducted mid-air refueling for a fleet of B-1B strategic heavy bombers, which can carry nuclear payloads anywhere in the world.
Once the refueling was done, we started our trip back to Malmstrom. I moved forward to the flight deck to enjoy the Aurora Borealis above us.
Flight paths for these refueling missions often included views of the Aurora Borealis, or Northern Lights.
All of a sudden, there was just this very bright light. The aircraft commander and the co-pilot, they saw it first. Time kind of froze for us, but it was probably a good minute that it was there. This light, we watched it all the way down into the Aurora where it stopped. And you could actually see the Aurora flowing around it, just as if you would see a bow wave going around the front of a boat. The longer the object stayed in the Aurora, the brighter the object got. And then it just shot straight up and was gone.
So some people would say, you're obviously confused, you saw a planet or a star.
We had no doubt in our mind that it was not a star or a planet because it entered our atmosphere. It was in the Aurora Borealis itself, and then it shot straight back up. I've seen the International Space Station. It moves at a very fast clip. This was moving 10 times plus. We all had the same reaction. It was almost a stunned silence. None of us had seen anything like that before.
Some folks will say, well, you know, it could be a Russian first stage booster rocket coming in on re-entry.
Well, initially we thought it was a shooting star, but then we saw the speed at which it was descending, and then it stopped.
According to Gibson's account, the object possessed 3 of the 5 observables: instantaneous acceleration, the ability to accelerate instantly from a standstill; hypersonic velocity, speeds of 3,700 miles per hour or more; and transmedium travel, the ability to move through air, water, and the vacuum of space.
You're going from an atmospheric environment to potentially a vacuum environment.
I don't know of any object in our inventory that has the capability to stop mid-re-entry, stay in position, and then once it's done, accelerate back out of the atmosphere. The G-forces would kill a human being.
To Elizondo, Major Gibson's sighting is part of a pattern. While working with ATIP, the Pentagon's Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, Elizondo says investigators researched multiple UFO sightings around northern tier nuclear bases during the Cold War. These sightings were part of a recently leaked 500-page government-funded report detailing dozens of alleged Cold War UFO encounters.
Is presently in DEFCON 4.
Investigative journalist Tim McMillan has studied the report.
There's a chart that showed the number of UFO sightings within proximity to different nuclear facilities that house weapon systems. There's a distinct correlation that these objects appear to be encroaching upon airspace of the northern tier. If you look at just those numbers alone, it's alarming.
One of the most remarkable Cold War-era sightings also occurred near Malmstrom Air Force Base, 28 years before Gibson's experience. In 1967, several Air Force personnel reported seeing a glowing red object flying over the base. The object appeared to move rapidly and was able to make sharp 90-degree turns, stop abruptly, and reverse course, much like the movements described by Major Gibson nearly 30 years later.
Both the UFOs had this incredible ability to take off and basically go from a very low velocity, almost a complete hover, to an incredible speed in the instant of time.
And there is one more detail that concerns Elizondo and his team. Reportedly, moments after the sighting, 10 of Malmstrom's nuclear warheads were suddenly, inexplicably turned off.
These weapon systems had been shut offline, so they couldn't be fired. If these were Russian aircraft, if these were someone else's aircraft, the idea that something could possess a technology that could fly within proximity and take these systems offline, that's a terrifying capability.
Is this some sort of U.S. secret technology or perhaps some sort of adversarial secret, weapon system or platform? There is a definitive link to nuclear technology, whether on the battle space or in time of peace. That, I think, is becoming more and more clear. The question is, why? What is the connection? I think each individual is a critical piece to this jigsaw puzzle. If it's not for their testimony, then we're missing a critical piece. Ultimately, you can't put together a puzzle unless you have all the pieces.
Lou Elizondo has just met with a pilot who says he engaged in a mid-air showdown with a UFO in southern Peru in 1980.
Enfocarlo bien, dispararle una ráfaga de 64 buses esperando que ese globo explote.
One theory is that the object was a U.S. reconnaissance drone, but the primitive drones at that time don't match the pilot's description of what he saw.
No había alas, no había motores, antenas, ventanas, cúpula, nada. O sea, era liso por todos lados.
I think it's gonna be better just black shirt.
Yeah.
And now, a commercial pilot has come forward with a similar sighting in 2019.
We're just gonna mic you up over here really quick.
He's asked not to be identified.
I want to thank you very much for having the courage to come forward.
Thank you.
In this particular case, this individual wants to keep his identity protected because he was afraid he may lose his job. First of all, what kind of pilot are you? What do you fly?
I'm a airline captain. I fly for a big carrier, and I fly an Airbus A320.
The pilot has flown domestic and international flights for the past 11 years.
It happened on March 1st, 2019. I was flying to Argentina. It was a red-eye flight in the middle of the night.
At about 2 a.m., his Airbus A320 is flying at 35,000 feet, approximately 150 miles off the coast of Chile.
As a pilot, you're kind of used to seeing like shining stars, ISS. I've actually been lucky to see some meteors come in, which are very small, which have this green color.
But this time, he sees a bright white orb tracking the plane to the west.
I saw this bright light, and I was like, okay, what is this? I took out my phone, and when I zoomed, I got to see this circular shape. If you want to see it, I can show you the video.
I would love to see that video.
But that's the video.
The pilot plays the video for Elizondo. It appears to show an orb inside another orb.
It started like moving in a wave pattern, from left to right, right to left. It was definitely bigger than a 747.
The pilot pans to the radar screen to record his exact location.
I'm glad you did that. That's smart.
That's the only way, I think, to have, in a way, evidence where it was, what altitude it was.
How long did you observe this light outside the cockpit window?
5 minutes.
Wow, okay.
What it is, I don't know.
What you filmed there, it's a real object. Now, I don't know what it is, but you have, that's something that actually occurred. Now, maybe it has a terrestrial explanation, maybe it doesn't, but one thing we do know is that is real, whatever that is.
But what was it? The pilot shares a video that appears to be of the same object taken 2 days earlier and nearly 2,000 miles away over Peru's largest airport.
But okay, this is actually what happened in Lima.
The Peruvian Air Force investigated the incident, concluding they were unable to identify the orbs seen over the airport.
That is a pretty bizarre looking craft. That doesn't look like anything that we have.
But one theory may provide a simple explanation. Over the past decade, Google has launched a fleet of high-altitude balloons to provide internet access to remote areas around the world. Called Project Loon, these large white balloons fly above Peru as high as 65,000 feet and could have floated from Peru to Chile.
So they have Google balloons all around Peru. They stay a certain amount of time, and after that, they go down to the earth.
So if this was, let's say, one of these balloons, would you have been made aware of it by ATC?
Totally.
Because it's an air flight safety issue.
Of course, yeah.
At this point, it's too early to tell if what the pilot saw is indeed the same objects that were reported over the Lima airport just days prior. There are some people that are absolutely confident it was a Google balloon. There's other people said there was no Google balloons in that area. So I think it's too premature to tell.
The cell phone video makes it difficult to tell if the object displays any of the 5 observables common to UFOs. So Elizondo sends it to retired Marine Lieutenant Colonel Chris Cook, an aviation consultant and former Top Gun pilot.
Hey there, Chris.
Hey Lou, how are you?
Doing pretty good.
Elizondo wants to know if the strange object in the video looks like anything Cook has seen before.
Can an aircraft, commercial or military, look like that from far away? Typically, you would see navigation lights, right?
One of the things that we do when we're at altitude, especially flying out in the middle of nowhere, if you do spot another aircraft, you turn wing lights or the landing lights on. It's kind of like a courtesy. But I've never seen anything like that where it's just one spherical light outside of maybe a bright planet.
Elizondo wants to explore the theory that the object might be a Google balloon.
I've heard of these things, but why would a balloon be illuminated that brightly at that altitude? And if it is a balloon, then you would expect there to be some closure on it, right? Because it should be stationary. It's a little baffling.
One of the statements the pilot made to me is that he had the impression that there was this oscillation. Do you have any idea at all what might give the appearance of some sort of oscillation? Are there aircraft that will pivot back and forth, or?
Not in my experience. I have not ever witnessed any type of aircraft at that altitude that have those characteristics that you just explained.
But does it show any of the 5 observables?
When I look at these incidents, I'm not just looking at video, I'm comparing it to the 5 observables: extreme acceleration and hypersonic velocities, and no control surface, flight surfaces, no obvious means of thrust or propulsion. Is there anything in that video that you see that you say, aha, that's an unusual performance characteristic?
This looks like nothing I've ever seen.
What's the likelihood that this could be a traditional aircraft? Scale of 1 to 10.
0.
Wow.
To Cook, the object clearly isn't a traditional aircraft. But what is it?
In this particular case, there's information out there that does not neatly fit within the categories of information we have. Does it mean it's not relevant? No. We have to take all the data points. Maybe it'll make sense. Maybe there's more than the 5 observables.
Throughout history, unidentified flying objects of various shapes and sizes have appeared in our skies. Thousands have witnessed mysterious flying saucers, orbs, cubes, and tic-tacs. but unidentified triangle-shaped craft have been reported by thousands of witnesses over the last 4 decades. So the team has launched a new investigation.
Hello. How are you? Thank you. Good. Come on in.
I was in the Army for 24 years. I got to Fort Bragg in January of 1990. Come August 1990 is when Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait.
What Iraq has done violates every norm of international law.
In December 1990, on the eve of the Gulf War, a veteran who asked to be called JT is deployed to a large American outpost in the Saudi desert.
I was deployed north to Hafr al-Batin. It's in heavily scanned, restricted airspace. It was Super Bowl Sunday. It was just past sunset. Everybody else was watching the pregame show, and I was the only one out there. As I looked up into the sky, I saw something that really caught my attention because it was the only thing there. It was a triangle of 3 orangish-white lights drifting silently and slowly through the sky. They moved as though they were part of an isosceles triangle. This was not a high-altitude object, probably between 1,000 and 2,000 feet is what I would estimate. It was following a perfect due east course, drifting elegantly through the sky. There was absolutely no sound at all. I mean, nothing. I was stunned. I was straight up stunned. I went back inside the tent, and I told my best friend about it, only him. And he had told me that he had heard others talking about similar things. And we really didn't go into it too much because the Super Bowl started and Whitney Houston sang the national anthem, and that was it. Everybody else was sucked into the game. I've never seen anything like it since then or before then.
JT's sighting matches descriptions the team has heard before.
He had a very clear view of lights on the corners of the triangle. It's part of a stunning global pattern that's reported by people from all walks of life, as well as military and law enforcement personnel.
That doesn't fit any type of known aircraft that I'm aware of.
Another Gulf War veteran believes he witnessed a similar triangle UFO just over a year later in the same area.
It was 1992 in the central Persian Gulf. I was a Navy cryptologic technician trained in Persian Farsi, the national language of Iran. I often deployed to the Persian Gulf, where we provided theater-level support to intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance missions.
This is probably one of the more highly trained individuals that the U.S. military and the intelligence community has. For all intents and purposes, this gentleman is a spy on the combat field.
The Gulf War had ended only a year earlier. Tensions remained high. Michael Vai was on the USS Mobile Bay, patrolling the Persian Gulf, not far from the location of JT's Saudi Arabia sighting.
I was temporarily assigned, and I was taking some time to come get some fresh air and see what was going on. I made my way up to the 06 level, about as high as you can get on this particular warship. I was up there just sightseeing, skylarking, as they say in the Navy. There were no flight ups underway, and all of a sudden, there was a pulsing sound that I felt as much as heard. It was a very low-frequency rumble, between a rumble and a pulse. Like a... I looked up, and there it was. It was the most pristine, equilateral, black triangle flying directly over our ship, as if it had flown right up our wake. Each corner were these bright, round areas. The altitude of this thing was about 10,000 feet, and its relative speed appeared to me to be somewhere between 300 and 500 miles per hour. The aircraft did not leave a contrail. It was absolutely stunning, majestic. From the time that I first saw the craft until it faded from view, it was no more than 10 seconds. So I went back down below deck, and I saw no indication that this thing was being tracked on radar. At the speed at which I had seen this thing passing overhead, it should have still been on the radar picture. It was in broad daylight, a direct overflight of some of the most sensitive airspace on the planet. I was astounded by what I saw.
Though Michael Vai's Gulf War sighting is similar to JT's, the team notices one striking difference.
Once again, here we have this black triangle that shows up. And this was in broad daylight, by the way. This wasn't at night.
Which is unusual.
Yes. 2 aircraft at that time that I can think of that would fit that pattern of a triangle. One being the F-117, and the other one may have been some sort of stealth bomber.
But the silent profile would reduce observability.
A low-flying triangle with lights on each corner, no contrails, no sound of jets, and no visible source of lift. Could the triangle spotted by JT and Vi be explained by a top-secret U.S. warplane? Triangle-shaped aircraft are a part of U.S. stealth plane history. America's first stealth warplane, the hypersonic SR-71 Blackbird, first saw action in the late 1960s. The B-2 stealth bomber was unveiled in 1989. And the F-17 Nighthawk, a stealth attack aircraft, played a crucial role in winning the Gulf War. All 3 aircraft used a radical new triangle-shaped design, but the military witnesses are certain these are not what they saw.
It was not an F-117 Nighthawk. It was not a B-2 bomber. It had no sawtooth edges. It was a perfect, black, equilateral triangle.
Even at 1,000, 2,000 feet, you're going to hear something from a F-117 or any other aircraft. As it moved through the sky, there was absolutely no sound at all. Not even a whisper. I mean, nothing.
I have an advanced degree in aviation science. I worked government aerospace for 20 years. This didn't fit anything that had previously been rolled out publicly.
We're putting together the mosaic with disparate pieces of data. It's a bit like putting together a jigsaw puzzle. At first, you have all these little pieces on the table, but little by little, the more pieces you have, the more the picture becomes in focus.
Lou Elizondo has just interviewed a second Vietnam veteran about a strange object he saw in an active war zone. But he needs to gather more data.
If we can establish the things that they were seeing back then in the past from the Vietnam War are indeed the same types of vehicles being observed and perhaps the same type of technology that we're seeing today, then maybe it'll help us figure out what these things are and where they're from.
Today, he's sitting down with a veteran who witnessed a similar object during the NATO bombing of Kosovo in 1999.
Mr. Tar, I presume.
Yes, sir.
Hey, how are you, sir?
How are you?
Thank you very much for
My
coming
pleasure.
here and speaking with me. I really appreciate it.
My name is Derek Tar. I was a senior airman during the late 90s serving in the United States Air Force. This is the first time I've ever told this story.
Derek Tar was a boom operator on an Air Force KC-10, responsible for the mid-air refueling of NATO jets between bombing runs.
You got a lot of pilots out there, but you have very few boom operators. These individuals are trained experts on all sorts of allied NATO aircraft. They know the difference between an F-18 Hornet, between an F-117 Night Fighter, an F-16. They know all these aircraft because they see them day in and day out.
On March 24th, 1999, Tar is on a refueling mission over the Adriatic Sea when suddenly he sees a strange light.
I was sitting in the boom pod in the back of the KC-10, just waiting for the next set of receivers to arrive. I had noticed a bright light that was behind us, slightly below our altitude. Just kind of hung back, didn't seem to make any more forward progress towards our aircraft. That's when I kind of started to wonder what was going on. I called up to my pilot on the interphone to ask him if we had more receivers coming and said that we did not have anyone scheduled.
Tar says the control center monitoring the airspace reported all known aircraft were accounted for.
We started into a turn, and as I look back, it's just a bright white orb. It was very bouncy, almost like a super ball. Very short, very succinct, very sharp movements, but extremely rapid. The jostling or oscillations that it was doing were certainly not minute adjustments, probably several hundred feet, up, down, side to side. Once I got to about our 8 o'clock position, it did a rapid climb and just in the blink of an eye went straight up and it just shot right up into the sky. Fastest thing I've ever seen.
The UFO Tar claims he saw was spherical, instead of the oblong shape of Tic Tacs, but it featured some of the same 5 observables.
We have hypersonic velocities, instantaneous acceleration, and of course, positive lift or in the vernacular, anti-gravity.
4 new sightings spanning decades in Kosovo, Afghanistan, and Vietnam. U.S. military eyewitnesses reported single objects in close proximity to American planes. And in the 2004 Nimitz encounter, where an entire carrier strike group was present, radar operators reported a fleet of objects.
What Tar saw and what the Nimitz folks had reported back in 2004, there were some commonalities in the performance of these things.
The team needs to gather more data to address the biggest question. Are these the same objects? And if so, what are they? In the case of Derek Tar's sighting, could the conflict itself offer a clue?
Clearly, when we engage Kosovo, we're operating in fairly close proximity to Russia, and it's an opportunity for them to collect intelligence on these cutting-edge aircraft in the U.S. inventory, including the stealth bomber.
The B-2 stealth bomber was first used in combat in the Kosovo War. At the time, it was America's most advanced aircraft.
So all of those kinds of technologies are very pertinent to the Russian military, who are constantly preparing for the eventuality in which they may have to engage the United States.
The thought did cross my mind that this certainly could be a hostile.
Are they really an adversarial technology that has managed to hoodwink us and leapfrog ahead of the United States going back decades? If that's the case, then I think we have a much, much bigger problem on our hands, because that means there is something inherently broken with our national security apparatus.
I think it very well could be a significant national security issue. If we just kind of bury our head in the sand or look away, we're screwed.